All right, so anyone who wants the real story on those NBA games last night?
Not just like who won and lost.
Exactly. More than that, right? Like, what does it all mean? You know, we dug into a bunch of reports, some analysis here.
Deep dive time.
Yeah, deep dive time. And oh man, let me tell you, some crazy stuff went down.
Some head scratchers for sure. We're going to break it all down.
Yeah, about the teams, the players.
And maybe, just maybe,
hints about what's coming next for the whole league. All right, well, let's jump right in.
Sounds good.
Let's start with this Kings game, man. Sacramento and Charlotte, 130-88. The Kings just destroyed them.
Wow.
Was this like a fluke, or is there something more here?
So the Kings' offense was just like firing on all cylinders. It wasn't just the scoring, though. It was how they were scoring.
Yeah.
De'Aaron Fox, he was amazing.
Orchestrating, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But here's what's interesting. His court vision has gotten so much better. He wasn't just focused on getting his own points. He was picking apart the Hornets' defense, finding those openings, getting easy shots for his teammates. Charlotte, they just couldn't keep up.
So not just Fox having a good night. This was like strategic takedown.
Oh, for sure.
I like it. Okay, let's move on to a game that was a little closer. Portland barely squeaking by the Utah Jazz, 114-112. Why was this one so tight?
The Jazz played incredible defense, I mean it. They were making Portland work for every single point.
Yeah, I saw that.
But you can never count out Damian Lillard, right?
All right.
Sinks that game-winning shot with just seconds left on the clock.
Ice in his veins.
Ice water, as they say. That clutch performance under that kind of pressure, that's what separates the good from the truly great.
It makes you think, though, are those clutch moments actually happening more, or are we just, like, more aware of them now because of how the game's covered?
It's a good question. Definitely a lot more focus on those individual plays and the storylines around them. But regardless, that Lillard shot, oh, man, it was beautiful.
It was.
Speaking of close games, did you catch the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Minnesota Timberwolves game?
Oh, yeah.
That went into overtime.
The real nail-biter.
131-128 for the Timberwolves in the end. These young guys, they really bring it, don't they?
Yeah, they bring the energy for sure.
Absolutely. That game, it was a showcase of all that raw talent that's taking over the league.
Definitely.
Anthony Edwards, he was electric for the Timberwolves, especially in overtime. Hitting those big shots, playing tough D, really shouldering the weight. You can see why everyone's saying he's a future superstar.
Yeah, I can see it.
Definitely a star in the making.
Okay, so we've got that veteran leadership from Lillard, and then you have young stars like Edwards just exploding onto the scene. It's a really interesting mix. All right, let's switch gears a bit. Atlanta shutting down Miami, 98-86. The Hawks, they're known for their offense, but this was a defensive clinic.
It really was. The Heat, usually no problem scoring for them.
Right.
They just couldn't find any rhythm at all.
It was like they hit a wall.
They did. Hawks' defensive strategy was just spot on. They were switching constantly, shutting down passing lanes, basically smothering Miami's key players. It just goes to show you sometimes you don't have to outscore them. You know, sometimes it's about completely shutting them down.
Defense wins championships. Or so they say.
It's true.
Okay, one more game to talk about. The Chicago Bulls dominating the Philadelphia 76ers, 142-110. Philly, I mean, they're a solid team. Does this tell us that the Bulls are just that good?
Zach LaVine, oh man, unstoppable in that game. Hitting everything, creating opportunities for his teammates, just imposed his will on that game. This wasn't just a win. This was a statement.
A statement win for sure.
The Bulls are here to play, and they're not afraid of anyone.
So we have the Kings exceeding everyone's expectations, the Hawks showing us what they can do on defense, and the Bulls making a serious statement. Seems like this season is going to be full of surprises.
Unpredictable for sure.
Yeah, which is what makes it so fun to watch.
And that's what we love about it.
Exactly. All right, so we talked about some of the individual games, but what do last night's results tell us about the league as a whole? Like, are we seeing any bigger trends here?
One thing that's really jumping out at me is the impact of these young guys coming up. We talked about Anthony Edwards and De'Aaron Fox, but that's just the start. You look at guys like LaMelo Ball in Charlotte or Ja Morant in Memphis. These young players are fearless.
Yeah, and they play with a lot of
So it's
creativity.
creativity, and they're changing the way the game is played. Honestly, it's exciting to see.
It feels like a changing of the guard almost. You've still got those established superstars like LeBron and Curry,
Right.
but this new generation, they're coming in with their own style, their own energy.
They are, and that's what makes it so dynamic and honestly kind of unpredictable. It's not just about experience anymore.
Right, it's not like it used to be.
It's about who can adapt,
Yeah.
who can innovate, who can push the boundary. It's a whole new game.
So teams can't just rely on those veteran players anymore,
Yeah.
right? They need to figure out how to blend that experience with this raw talent coming in from these young guys.
And that's where the coaching gets really interesting.
Coaching, yeah.
We're seeing some really fascinating strategies this season, especially on defense. Teams are experimenting with all kinds of schemes, switching more often, really trying to disrupt their opponents' offenses.
It feels like defense is becoming a much bigger factor in the game now. It seemed like for a while, the league was all about offense,
Yeah.
three-pointers, high-scoring games.
All right.
But now teams are realizing that defense can be just as exciting.
Absolutely. And just as impactful, if not more so.
Exactly. And it makes a team like the Atlanta Hawks so interesting to watch. They've got Trae Young, who's an offensive genius.
Oh, yeah.
But now they've added this defensive identity, and it's made them a real contender.
For sure.
It's that balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Offense gets the fans hyped up, but defense wins championships.
There's a reason that's such a classic saying. And it's not just about stopping the other team from scoring. It's about creating turnovers, those fast breaks, controlling the pace of the game.
Dictating the flow.
Exactly.
So for the casual fan, the person who maybe just checks the box scores, what should they be looking for besides just points? What are those subtle things that really make a difference in these games?
Pay attention to the defensive rotations, those hustle plays, the assists, steals, the block.
Those hustle plays.
They don't always make the highlights,
Yeah.
but they're often the difference between winning and losing. It's the little things.
Yeah, it's about appreciating those nuances. The strategy, the execution, the effort on every single possession.
Exactly. It's about understanding that basketball is more than just putting the ball through the hoop.
Right, there's so much more to it.
It's a complex, beautiful sport, and it rewards those who take the time to really understand it, those intricacies. That's where the beauty is.
It's funny, we started out talking about individual games, but now we're talking about these bigger trends and shifts in the whole league.
And that's what I love about basketball. It's always evolving, adapting, finding new ways to surprise us.
And to delight us, hopefully.
To delight us, definitely. It's a good time to be a fan.
So what does all this mean for the rest of the season? I mean, we've seen surprises, we've seen players having breakout performances, teams exceeding expectations. As we get closer to the playoffs, what should we be watching for?
The playoff race. It's going to be exciting.
I bet it is.
We've got a few clear contenders, obviously. But there's a big group of teams in the middle fighting for those last spots.
It's wide open this year.
It is. It's anyone's game at this point, and that makes for a really compelling story,
It definitely does.
And with these young stars coming up, that emphasis on defense we talk about, the game is constantly evolving. I think we're in for a pretty wild finish to the season.
I think so too.
It's going to get.
Speaking of evolution, there's one part of the game that's been really interesting to watch, the three-point shot. Seems like it's just become more and more dominant in recent years.
It has. The three-pointer has revolutionized basketball, changed the way teams play, the way players train, even the way we watch the game. But it's also brought up some really interesting questions about the future of the sport.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting.
It does.
Just tell me more about that.
Yeah, it has. It's become such a force in the game.
Yeah,
It's sparked a lot of debate,
I can imagine.
Some people, they argue that it's made things more exciting, more dynamic, makes defenses spread out, creates more chances for driving to the basket, or those crazy dunks.
I mean, gotta admit, there's nothing quite like watching a bunch of three-pointers go in.
Right. It's exciting.
Definitely brings a certain energy to the game.
Exactly. And you can't forget the skill it takes to make those shots consistently.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's precision, it's hand-eye coordination, it's hours of practice.
Absolutely. So on one hand, we're celebrating all that athleticism and skill, but what about the other side of this? What are the worries people have about this whole three-point era?
Well, some people are worried that all this focus on the three-pointer is kind of overshadowing other parts of the game that are important.
Like what?
Like mid-range shooting, for example.
Oh yeah, the mid-range game.
Post play, passing.
Right, those fundamentals?
Exactly. Those things used to be like the foundation of basketball.
Yeah, right.
And now they're not getting as much attention.
So are we saying we're sacrificing the fundamentals just for highlights?
It's a good question.
Is it making the game too one-dimensional?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
The mid-range game, I mean, it was a staple.
Yeah.
And now it's almost like a lost art.
Yeah, you don't see it as much anymore.
And those traditional big men who used to dominate under the basket, now they're being asked to step out and shoot threes.
It makes you wonder, is all of this really good for the game in the long run? Are we losing something important in this chase for high scores and three-pointers?
It's a tough one. It's complicated.
It is, yeah.
I think it comes down to balance.
Balance, yeah.
The three-pointer is a big part of the game now.
For sure.
But it shouldn't mean we forget about those other skills.
Right.
We have to find a way to embrace how the game is changing, but also keep those core elements that make basketball so special.
So it's not about picking a side, it's about finding that middle ground.
Exactly.
Where all the different parts of the game can work together.
Yeah. We can celebrate those athletic plays, the excitement of long-range shooting, but also encourage players to develop all their skills, to be well-rounded.
Makes sense. And it's interesting to think about this when we talk about those rising stars we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, how does this affect them?
Right. A lot of them are amazing athletes. They can hit those threes.
Incredible range.
But are they learning those other things too?
That's the key question. It's going to be really interesting to see how these young guys develop as they get more experience.
Yeah.
Will they just become those one-dimensional shooters? Or will they become those complete players who can take over any part of the game?
It's like we're watching the future of basketball happen right now. And there are so many possibilities.
So many. The game's always changing, always evolving, always finding ways to adapt.
And we get to watch it happen.
We do. It's a great time to be a fan.
All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
we've talked about the excitement of the three-pointer, but also some of the concerns that come with it.
I need that balance.
Right, that balance. So as you're watching the games, think about what we talked about today.
Definitely.
Don't just look at the scores and the highlights.
Look deeper.
Exactly. Pay attention to those little things that sometimes go unnoticed.
I quite.
Those defensive rotations, the hustle plays, the passes that lead to those wide open shots.
And appreciate those mid-range jumpers, those classic post moves. A player who can see their teammate cutting to the basket and get them the ball.
It's beautiful to watch.
It is.
Because basketball is more than just a game.
It's a story.
Yeah.
It's a journey. It's this constant evolution of skill, strategy, athleticism.
And that story is still being written.
Exactly. Who's going to step up? Which teams will adapt and win? What new things will we see?
Those are the questions we'll keep asking.
As the season goes on.
Exactly. So keep watching, keep learning, keep diving deep into the world of basketball.
Yeah.
Because the best is yet to come.
I think you're right about that.
It
really does. It's funny.
What's that?
We were just talking about how the three-pointers changed the game.
Right, right.
And it's true. But some people worry it's gone too far,
Oh, interesting.
Like it's become so important, it's overshadowing other parts of the game, the stuff that used to be crucial.
I see what you mean. Like what kind of stuff?
Well, think about mid-range shooting.
Yeah, classics.
Right. That used to be fundamental, but now you don't see it as much.
True. It's less common now, for sure.
And the big guys,
Yeah.
the centers, who used to just dominate under the basket.
Old school. Yeah.
Now even they're being asked to shoot threes.
Wow. The game really has changed.
It has. And the question is it good for the game in the long run? Are we losing something important by chasing all these threes and high scores?
It's a good question. It's like, are we sacrificing the heart of the game for flashiness?
Exactly. That's the worry some people have. The mid-range game, for example, it was an art.
It really was.
And now it's fading away. And like I said, those big men, they had their own moves, their own style.
Yeah, the post-up game, all that.
Exactly. And now they're expected to be outside shooters too.
It does make you think, what are we gaining and what are we losing with this whole three-point revolution?
Right. It's a complex issue. I think it's about finding the right balance.
Balance. Yeah.
Like the three-pointer, it's part of the modern game. We can't deny that.
Of course not.
But it shouldn't mean we forget everything else that makes basketball great.
The fundamentals, the different styles of play.
Exactly. We got to find a way to embrace the evolution of the game, but also keep those core elements that make it so unique.
So it's not about picking aside three-pointers or no three-pointers. It's about finding that happy medium.
Yeah, a middle ground where everything can thrive.
Mhm.
Celebrate the athleticism, the excitement of those long shots,
Yeah.
but also encourage players to be well-rounded.
Develop all those skills, not just the one.
Right, and that's what makes those young stars we talked about so interesting.
Right, right.
They've got the athleticism, the three-point shooting,
Amazing to watch.
but are they learning those other skills too?
The ones that might not be as flashy, but are just as important.
Exactly. It'll be fascinating to see how they develop. Will they just be three-point specialists, or will they become those players who can do it all?
I guess we'll have to wait and see.
We will. But that's the exciting part. It's like we're watching the future of basketball being written right now.
It really is, and there's so many different paths it could take.
So many possibilities. The game is constantly changing. That's what makes it so great.
All right, well, as we wrap up this deep dive, it's been an awesome conversation.
It has. Lots to think about.
For sure. We talked about the excitement of the three-pointer.
And the concerns that come with it.
Right, that balance again. So as you're watching those games, keep this conversation in mind.
Definitely.
Look beyond just the score and the highlights.
Look deeper. See what's really happening.
Exactly. Those defensive moves, the hustle plays, those passes that set up perfect shots.
And appreciate those mid-range shots when you see them.
Yeah, they're becoming rare these days.
They are. But they're still part of the game, part of that history.
Right, right. Because basketball is more than just a game. It's a story. It's this journey of skill and strategy and athleticism.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And that story, it's still being written.
Who's going to rise to the top? What new innovations will we see? It's all up in the air.
It's exciting. So everyone listening, keep watching, keep learning, keep diving deep into the world of basketball because this is just the beginning.
The best is yet to come. I really believe that.
I do too. And that's a wrap on this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.